Yeah, I can see. I'm in the chat.
Okay, well, let
Did you
me
start?
introduce myself. Got to throw my hair over the chair so it doesn't poke me in the back. Hello and welcome to another video from the only, or hello and welcome to another live stream from the only source of information you need to not only survive the current apocalypse, but actually enjoy it. And today's live stream is going to cover all the information we learned in part 3 of the Melchizedek series, which posted on Friday. Today is Sunday. We're doing, this is our third live stream. And so far we've only got one up because we've been struggling. As Yogi Bear would say, deja vu all over again. Was that Yogi Bear? Or was it Boo Boo? Oh well, doesn't matter. Anyways, I think I've seen all the Yogi Bear episodes, and I do not remember him ever saying that. All 3 of the videos that we've produced so far, or that we've actually posted, were basically one subject. Each and every one of them was designed to get you to the point we got to in the last video you saw, which is to identify the actual identity of Melchizedek, which is, of course, Canaan. Now, something that's been going on since I started posting is that I've been getting a lot of thumbs up, not too many views, but the usual cast of characters is signing in. But this last one, where I actually revealed the identity of Melchizedek, I got 3 of these. Thumbs down. I don't think I got any thumbs down on the previous 2. And I think the main reason for that is that every single person that's coming here to find out who Melchizedek is belongs to some kind of a church. And so they've got a 2,000-year propaganda system in place to tell us all that Canaan was an evil man because he was the wrong color or the wrong race, the wrong nationality or the wrong religion or something. And so to find out that Canaan is the one that Abraham actually paid tithes to, the one that God called the rightful king, is disgusting to these people. Basically what we have nowadays, at one time there was the 3 big religions were Islam, which we call the Muslims, Judaism, and Christianity, and they all seem to hate each other. But in recent years, Christianity has converted over to Jew worship or Israel worship, and because of that, suddenly a lot of the hatred that Christianity had towards Judaism has converted over into a form of worship. And so people want to believe that God has a chosen people, not just a chosen people like, okay, he likes me, so I'm part of his chosen people. He likes Al Toledo, so Al Toledo's part of his chosen people. The chosen people teaching is always based on race, like the race that God loves and the races that God hates. As if somehow the creator of the universe was somehow forced to create all those people he didn't like. Well, the fact is we're all brothers and sisters because each and every one of our lineages lead back to the original humans created by God, which means that we are all children of God, biologically. Now, in the Bible, the only people called children of God are the people who were actually created directly by God, like Adam. Adam is called the child of God, just like Jesus is called the child of God. In our English Bibles, Adam's called the son of God, which isn't linguistically correct, but it's the basic concept of God had a child, he's male in gender, and that's okay. It's misleading, but it's okay. Same thing with Jesus. Jesus is a child of God. And so these are the only 2 named children of God in the entire Bible. However, back in the book of Genesis, we are told about a group of individuals called the children of God or the sons of God. Even in the book of Job, we're told about multiple sons of God. And so those sons of God are always called sons of God for one reason. They were created directly by the hand of God. The rest of us, all of us who are alive today, came about via a process called biological reproduction. So that makes us different. But if we follow our genealogy, our actual natural biological genealogy back to its source, we're all children of God. There is no such thing as God's chosen people. At one time, God decided to separate a small group of oppressed people from the empire to give them an opportunity to live as free people. And he chose this group to make them free. At that time, he didn't choose their grandchildren, great-grandchildren, or people who worship their God, or people who performed their rituals as his chosen people. That group at that time was his chosen people. And he entered into a covenant with those people. And as long as the covenant was alive, those people remained his chosen people. But once the covenant ended, that's it. We can still refer to those people who are all dead now as God's chosen people. But after that happened, no one was God's chosen people. And any scriptures you can find that talk about how God's chosen people are his chosen people forever is a misrepresentation of what the initial concept was. God does not have a chosen people based on who is biologically descended from who, and he doesn't have a chosen people based on what religion somebody's involved in. Because as the Bible says, the father of religion, or the father of civilization, is Lord Satan. So that means all of civilization's political systems, all of civilization's economic systems, all of civilization's religious systems belong to Lord Satan. So if you want to consider yourself Lord Satan's chosen people, you can. If you want to consider yourself as God's chosen people, well, he doesn't have to choose anybody. We belong to him. He's our Father. Okay, I had my rant. Now let's get into what's going on here. People saying anything out there, Alfredo?
Yeah, we have a few people, not as many as last stream, so hopefully they filter in, or I guess they'll watch the recording. But first comment comes from Shannon. He seems to be your number one fan after me.
He must be, because he's not here. He's in the world where it's like 4 in the morning or 3 in the morning now. So if he's watching this, then he's my number one fan, especially today.
Yeah, that's true. Okay. And then next comes get your shells. He says you're back. Chester Richardson says many blessings and much love and light to everybody. Bug Out Bubba says you're back. Vincent S says hello from Alberta, Canada. Davey Chauffeur says shalom from Fayette, Georgia. And
I didn't know they were speaking Hebrew over there in Fayette.
You know, I was going to ask you. I mean, everybody seems to talk about chauffeur, and chauffeur.
It's like a ram's horn, shofar. You know that we talk about the Feast of Trumpets. That's not really accurate. I mean, it's an easy explanation that us Westerners can understand. But a shofar is like a ram's horn. You see those images of the rabbis, or you'll see a man like dressed in a traditional garb of Bible storybooks. He's holding up that ram's horn. He had to go out and blow that. Somebody in each village would have to go out and blow that horn when the moon went dark. Now, that's not the way it's taught in the churches. People believe that, no, it wasn't anything to do with the moon turning dark. It was about, how many days from the Passover and, what day of the year, month of the year. But the reality is, back then, they did not have paper calendars. The only way they knew when to blow the shofar was when the moon went dark, which happened twice a year. It happened once in Israel, and then 6 months later, it would happen over Hawaii somewhere. So there was never anybody with a shofar over in Hawaii, so they didn't do it. But over in Israel or Middle East, they would do that. And it wasn't just the Jewish culture, it was a lot of cultures. So that's what shofar is. But there's also the word shalom, that just means peace. That's where we get the word Salem in the Bible, Salem. It is that's what Jerusalem was called before the flood. After the flood, Salem became called Jerusalem. And I think that's what Melchizedek is called. He's called the rightful king, but he's also called King of Salem, I think, which is Shalom, King of Peace.
And then there's the Salem witch trials, so I guess.
There's a Salem in America, so yeah, we have peace. It's not very peaceful if you're a witch. If you're a witch, don't move there.
Okay, just a couple comments coming in from your monologue. Chester Richardson says he doesn't belong to any church. Davey Shofar, you made a comment about race, and he says we're all one race.
That's right.
Vincent S. says, just sad that we can't emigrate to Israel if you do not have Jewish blood in you.
Yeah, but it doesn't take much to. Well, initially, when they started the artificial nation of Israel, which is what exists over there, they exterminated and locked up all of the actual people of Israeli heritage. So all the Palestinians basically were the descendants of the original occupants of the land, but after the temple was destroyed and most of the people were exterminated, brought into captivity, they just kind of became part of the surrounding nation. So, right after World War II, this big push came to create like a territory of America there and to give it some kind of legitimacy. Instead of just going in and killing everybody and saying, we're taking your land, they said, oh, we're returning this land to the poor Jews, So they brought a bunch of people in, and basically you had to sign a piece of paper saying, yes, I am Jewish. But they had no way to prove it, so they just signed the paper and they got in. And there's been a lot of research into this saying that there's not a single person that would be considered of Hebrew descent that's in there. They're all like outsiders, but they've been given free land, free money, free food, free jobs just for moving in. And now I don't know what it takes now to get in there. They're running out of houses. They've been pushing the Palestinians into tinier and tinier little encampments. Now, basically, the only way they can give you houses is if they go in there and exterminate everybody, and then it's just a little bit of land, so that'd run out pretty quick. Yeah,
Have you heard the theory where they're like it's a different type of Jewish person, like they came from Russia or something like that?
Yeah. Don't they call them Ashkenazis? Ashkenazi Jews, isn't
right,
it?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
And you know what? Here's the thing: is like that might be true. I really, really don't think that the people that live there now have any real connection to the original occupants. That's point number one. Point number two is we do know who the original occupants of America are, and there never has been a big rush to put them back in, even though their great-grandparents are the ones that were exterminated. And yet the Jewish homeland was taken from people 2,000 years ago? How in the world are those people over there suffering for what we did to their great all the way back to infinity grandparents? It's just such a bizarre thing. It's a very obvious political move. It has absolutely nothing to do with truth. It has nothing to do with justice. It was simply a move by the Anglo-American world empire to take over the land and give some legitimacy to their occupation of that land. But as far as who went in and where they came from, that's all goes back to racism too. It's like we're supposed to think the Ashkenazi Jews are defective or something, and reality is it's just it's just one of those things that the empire does, and it's wrong, and when this is all over with, everybody's going to know it's wrong.
Next hello comes from Cindy Kester, says hello everyone. And the next question comes from Troy McLean. He says, who is Israel in the Bible? And is in the book of Romans, it says, Jacob I love and Esau I hate. Who is Esau?
Okay, well, this is all like kind of leading towards an excuse for religious racism, but Esau was the brother of Jacob. Is that right? Wasn't he the brother of Jacob? Ala Toledo, you got to help me here. Can you do some research real quick? Yeah, it was. Jacob and Esau, they were twins. And so Esau means red, I think. And so when he came out, he had hair on his body, red hair all over his body, and his brother Jacob did not. So as they were being born, one baby tried to come out, but he got pulled back in, pulled back into the mother, and then the next one went in. And so that's where we get the name Jacob. So there's two brothers, Esau and Jacob. They're twins. one of them grabs the heel of the other in an attempt to get the promise to be the firstborn of Isaac. So you understand, it's like Abraham had a child. His firstborn child was actually not pure blood. He was a child of Hagar, who was an Egyptian. So these angels come and say, "You're going to take over the land. You're going to be the king of your pure bloodline." And Abraham said, "That's impossible. My child is from an Egyptian woman." He says, "No, no, no." And he laughed, and he says, "Why are you laughing?" He said, "Oh, I wasn't laughing." "Yeah, you were. You were laughing. So we're going to come back in a year. You're going to have a kid." Abraham was 100 years old. He had Isaac. So Isaac was by his sister. See, that was the whole thing. It had to be pure bloods. Abraham and Sarah had to have a child together, and that child was Isaac. So Isaac actually got the inheritance, the promise of kingship over the family line of the Hebrews. His brother, Hagar's child, was run off with Hagar. Okay, so then when Isaac had a child, his child, he had two children, Esau and Jacob. Jacob, Eokob, it's a Hebrew word. Eokob means grabber of the heel, because as he was coming out, he tried to fight to get ahead of his brother. So he grabbed his heel. So that's what Eokob means. Okay, later, when the blessing was still given to Esau, even though Jacob's the one that wanted it, Jacob went and strapped some like goat's hair onto his arm so his father would feel the hair and say, "Oh yeah, you're my son Esau." So Jacob tricked Esau. He tricked his father. His father wanted his son to go out and kill a deer and bring him back some deer stew. And so Jacob ran and killed a goat, and he fed his father goat stew instead of deer stew, and his father fell for it. He was old. He was hard, couldn't see. He touched his hands. Well, when Esau comes back, the mother tells Jacob, "You better get out of here. Esau's going to kill you." So he ran away and and hid. And in this process, I mean, there's a whole lot more to the story, but he ends up trying to get an angel to grant him the promise, to grant him rulership over the promised land. Angel says, "No, no, no, I'm not doing that." So Jacob said, "I'm not letting you go until you give me a blessing," to an angel, right? And so they get in this fight, and Jacob and this angel fight all night long, and when it's done, Jacob's crippled. He's knocked his hip out of joint, and so the angel says, okay, I give. I'm giving you a blessing. But at that point, Jacob's already messed up. But from that point on, he's no longer called Jacob. He's called Israel. Israel means he who fights against God or fights against the angels. Israel. And that's where Israel comes from. So the word Israel, the nation of Israel, that word actually means he who fights against God. You didn't know I knew all that, did you, Alice Toledo?
Well, that seems kind of appropriate. Isn't that like an unusual name to call your country if it's going against God?
Well, they don't know what anything means over there. I mean, people who are religious are just stupid. Because, I mean, they don't just call themselves Israel, which means those who fight against God. They call themselves Zion. And the word Zion, the reason that they weren't called Zion. They were called the land of milk and honey. And God said, "Go into the land of milk and honey." So they go into this forest with a 1,000-foot canopy that with fruit falling on their heads, never have to do anything. It didn't matter. January, February, 12 months a year, they had food just falling out of the trees. And they get in there and they start cutting the trees down and building houses. And eventually the trees are no longer providing their food. They have to engage in agriculture. They have to start hunting. They have to start raising animals. And when it was all over with, God's forest was burnt, gone, nothing left of it. The beautiful paradise garden he gave to the nation of Israel was destroyed within a very short amount of time. At that point, they stopped calling it the land of milk and honey, and they start calling it Zion, because Zion means burnt place. Zionism means the belief in the destruction of the earth.
Wow, that's pretty powerful.
Thank you.
Next up comes KNFX 787 says, hello, Henry. Great series of videos so far. And next question, it comes from Get Your Shells. He says, I've been watching the skies a lot lately, and I've been trying to remember back to my childhood, and I can't remember seeing the sun and the moon so visible during the daylight. It's puzzling.
Yeah, well, you know, it's really weird to me. I mean, there is an explanation out there, and I'm not buying into it, but there's a lot of stuff in the sky that looks a lot closer, a lot brighter. We're seeing things that don't look like they belong, but I'm not taking a stand one way or the other because I didn't keep careful measurements of everything when I was a kid, you know, and then when I started understanding that we were going to see signs in the sun and the earth and the moon, then I started looking. And I started questioning everything. And I've got a friend now, a subscriber, who is an astronomer, taught astronomy in college as a professor, went on to work at two observatories, a radio observatory, an optical observatory, and is now teaching from home astronomy. And she's really, she's seeing a lot of stuff that doesn't make sense. But she's checking her computer along with what's going on in the sky. And some days she'll send me a message saying, this is not right. The sky does not look right tonight. It doesn't match where it's supposed to be. But as of late, she's been going through all of her stuff, and she's calling me and saying, or sending me emails or whatever, and saying, things look okay tonight. Everything looks like it's where it belongs. But the fact is, all around the world, there are YouTubers uploading video of weird stuff in the sky, and their explanations do not go along with the sky we're supposed to see. And so, whether something strange is happening in our sky right now or not, there are a lot of people who suddenly are thinking it looks strange. You know, that's unique in history. I can promise you 10 years ago, if you had gone online and did some research about are the stars where they belong or the sun or the moon, everybody just say, yeah. Now there's people just going out of their way to produce videos showing things in the sky that don't look right. So that's kind of a sign that we're headed towards the last days, because that's what we're going to see in the last days is that the sky is going to change. And if we get enough people looking up there, it'll be noticed.
You know, I don't remember if it was you or some other YouTuber that I heard say something about there was an artificial star up in the sky, and then like creating an artificial Big Dipper or something like that, and then they were going to merge or something along that lines, like Saturn was merging with, I don't know, another planet or something.
Well, that is actually happening tonight even. I mean, it's been going on for a while. I don't understand how that is, because, you know, okay, here's our sun, right? Here goes Mercury, out here's Venus, a little further out is Earth, after that is Mars, then you got Saturn, or Jupiter, Saturn, and Neptune, or Uranus and Neptune. So we can't even see Uranus and Neptune. They're too far away. But I've got this iPad I've got right here that I'm talking to. This iPad. I have a program on it where I can just point it at a star. If I line my camera up, it'll have that star in the camera, and it'll show the star, and it'll tell me the name of the star and where it's headed, and, you know, what time it'll be at certain places. And for probably 2 months now, if you point it to Jupiter, which is easy enough to see, you look around, you can't see Saturn anywhere. But if you jiggle the iPad, it'll show you Saturn hiding behind Jupiter, which is really rare. You know, it's like something I had in my head that when planets would merge like that it would merge for a day, and the next day you would slowly start to see them separating again. I've been looking at this thing for a while, and it's always lined up. Now, here's the unique thing about it. This thing, GPS or whatever's in there, will allow me to look at planets and stars that are not even in my sky. In other words, I can take this iPad, point it down at the ground, and it'll show me what's on the other side of the Earth. And something nobody's talking about is the fact that Mercury and Venus have been lined up. Now, what that means, if we go this way and there's Jupiter and Saturn, we're on the Earth, we turn it directly, 180 degrees around, we can see Mercury and Venus. That means Mercury, Venus, Earth, Jupiter, and Saturn are in perfect alignment. That's weird. It's not like that can't happen, but that's really, really weird. And, I mean, that's a real conjunction. That's just not what we can perceive. That's real. That's going on. And keep in mind that Uranus and Neptune are invisible to the naked eye. So when I pointed out there, it's not telling me where those are, but they may be in alignment as well. The only one I can see that is not in alignment is Mars. And I have never in my life seen Mars as bright as I've been seeing it for the last 6 months. I don't want to sound like a conspiracy theorist kook, but a lot of stuff in the sky is just questionable now.
Yeah, a couple comments. Cindy Kester says, I too think the stars are the key to what is coming. And then Shannon says, it's all really weird. I think that, at least in his part of the world, it's been overcast and dreary more than he ever remembers. And he cannot get a clear look at the true solar system. It was never this way before about a year ago, he says.
I can tell you that for us, it started raining. We had that hurricane. I don't think we've had a clear day since a hurricane. I go out there. I'll be on the telephone talking to somebody or on Skype or whatever, and they say, "Man, is anything going on with the stars?" I'm like, "Yeah, I didn't think about it. Let me go look right now." And I'll go outside, bring my iPad with me, and I can't see anything. So it's hard to say. But like I say, I'm just an ignorant country boy. There are people that are subscribed to the channel that are a lot brighter than me on that subject, and I'm kind of dependent on them to report into me from time to time when things don't look right. And I will pass the information on. In fact, the two of us were talking about doing a thing together where we make a video about this, just the basics of how our solar system works, so that everybody can be looking. I'm not talking about doing trigonometric, equations to tell precisely where each planet's supposed to be. Just basic general observation, because that's what the Bible's written for. The Bible is not written for astronomers. It's written for us, people that don't know anything. We should be able to, when the sign of Christ's return comes, the sign of the last days, the 3.5 years prior to Jesus returning to the earth, we are supposed to be able to look into the sky and see things that no man has seen for thousands of years. Okay, so that's coming up, and I think it'd be good for everybody to be educated about what they should be looking for, so that they aren't just calling every time they see a star that they didn't see before.
Let's see. Another hello, JJ Space, kind of ironic, says, hello, what? I get to see you live. What? And then back to the topic of Israel, Cindy Kester says, wow, that's more than I ever knew about Jacob. Thanks for that. And Ralph Gutierrez says, so did the people in the promised land before Joshua defeated them take care of the land better than the Israelis did? If it wasn't scorched or Zion before they got there, was it taken care of better?
I think so. It's like, okay, in the Bible, we're always reading about what the Israelites did and how God's chosen people were brought into this land. There really isn't really too much information about what was going on in there at the time. All we know is that when they got to the edge, the outskirts, okay, here's promised land here, right? So they're coming from Egypt to come into the promised land. Now they're told they crossed over the Euphrates River or something like that. It's like, nah. What they did is they came up and they crossed over the Jordan. And the reason we even know that is because it was a miraculous crossing, just like when they crossed the Red Sea. When Joshua got to the edge and they came south down into Israel, they crossed the Jordan the same way as they did. It split, just like the Red Sea. So when right there stationed, like along the Jordan, I think, was the what is the city with the wall, Jericho? Rahab was up there, and she protected the two spies that were sent out. Well, they came through there, and they just marched around it till it collapsed. Now, we're not told about a whole bunch of people that were inside the promised land, but prior to that, Abraham lived in the promised land, and there really was a Salem still there, where Jerusalem is now. And there were people of the land, and at the time, that phrase, people of the land, was a good thing. It was like, those were good people. Those were the people that Abraham went to. Anytime he did anything, it's like he'd go to the people of the land and talk to them. They were like indigenous, naked people running around in the promised land, basically like the indigenous peoples of Australia or Africa or North America, South America. They had those people there, and they were not doing destruction. It's like Abraham kind of represented Babylon, because that's where he came from. When his people were carried off into captivity, they were in Egypt. So when the Israelites came back, they were basically Egyptians. So it was basically God allowing civilization a people to escape from civilization to go to where these indigenous people lived. Seemingly. That's what it seems like to me.
Okay, well, we're kind of running out of questions. It doesn't look like we have many people here, but I was going to ask you about what you think the response so far to the series has been. Have you been pretty happy with people's response, and do you think it's made an impact on people?
I always wonder, okay, here's the thing. I'm revealing all the secrets of the universe. I'm not going to joke about it or downplay it. I am telling people things that have not been revealed to mankind for 2,000 years, and it's not like some kind of an accident. I don't make a video and then spend the next 20 years talking about that video. Every video I make reveals things to mankind that have not been revealed since Christ was killed. I expect fully that 7 billion people ought to be watching this channel right now. I'm not joking about that. And so it's a little bit discouraging when I got 500 viewers. But I think when the big events start happening, when you look up and the moon is where, really obviously where it doesn't belong, somebody somewhere is going to tell the networks there's a crazy old nasty man lives in a shack out in the swamp, and he's been telling us about this for 15 years. And hopefully I'll get a few more subscribers in. I'm not angry about it. I spent the first 40 years of my life talking to myself. So, when I was happy when one person would listen to me. So to have probably 500 listening now is, that's spectacular. It almost makes me look like a jerk for complaining.
Going back to the idea of Israel and the natives and everything, Ralph Gutierrez says, so why would God kick out the natives out of their own land?
Okay. Read the question again. I was reading off of my screen and not paying attention like I should.
Well, going back to the whole discussion about Israel and who belongs in Israel and such, and
modern Israel or ancient Israel?
I think it would be, I'm not really sure, but Ralph Gutierrez says, so why would God kick out the natives out of their own land?
There are, like in the ancient past, they didn't really kick the natives out of the land, because if you read the stories, it's like part of the land seemingly was protected. So there weren't people directly in that area at that time, or not very many, or not significant. When the Joshua marched around Jericho, that was on the outskirts. It was a city. It had walls made out of bricks or stones or whatever. And but when you get into the land, they don't really come across a whole bunch of civilization type structures. So, and the people that were there were not forced out. They were allowed to join if they wanted to. Once when Israel got in, they said, okay, this is God's law that we're living. We made a deal with God. We told him we wouldn't live by his law, but if he gave us the law of Moses, we would follow that, and we would make sure that everybody who lived here followed the same rules we do. Which it wasn't that big of a deal. I mean, it would be for me, because I don't want anybody cutting on me, but they had to get circumcised. That was basically it. And then after that, they couldn't eat like the wrong kind of foods or whatever, and they had to participate in whatever rituals. But let's say this is the promised land, right? That's everything between the Euphrates and the Nile. It's a big area. And when the Israelites moved in, that's not what they divided up. They divided up this little piece in the middle, a little piece like that. They cut it into 12 sections. They said, okay, I'm giving you this little piece. If you live by my rules, you can stay in this little piece. The people outside of that, they can't come into this part, until they fulfill certain religious obligations, which wasn't that big of a deal. There were some cultures that could not enter the promised land until 10 generations passed, I think. But by the time they had crossed over from Egypt, a lot had already passed, and so. And then there wasn't anybody keeping records. So we really don't know how that worked out, because the nation of Israel kind of collapsed on itself like on day 2. Day 1, they're all going, hallelujah, hallelujah, bringing the law down. And day 2, they're all worshiping metal animals, and they're sacrificing, their children to Baal and all that kind of stuff. So, the history of Israel is not all that cut and dry. All we really have for the ancient history of Israel is the Bible, and all we have for the modern history of Israel is propaganda. So we're kind of limited on what we actually know. We know that God made a deal with these people. They broke the deal, and so he said, okay, do what you want. And so they said, okay, here's the rules, no sex unless you get a permission slip, no, got to wear this kind of clothes, got to eat this kind of food, that kind of nonsense. The original rules given to Adam were eat food, get plenty of rest, make love, make babies, and make sure nothing bad happens to the forest. So he brings them to this place that had a forest, one of the last forests on the earth probably. He says, okay, the same rules as Adam. Of course, he enumerated them. Thou shalt love God, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not worship idols, you shall not steal, shall not pretend to love somebody in order to take advantage of them, which we translate as do not commit fornication. Thou shalt not treat love as a commodity, which is what adultery is. Adultery is not having sex with someone else's wife. Adultery is treating love as a commodity. So basically marriage. I will love you. Sign this piece of paper, have it officiated. And so all those rules were thrown out, like day one, thrown out. Moses brought them down. He didn't even get all the way down to the people before he was throwing the rules down and breaking them. And God said, well, look, okay, you don't want to live by the rules I gave you. Go ahead and make your own rules. And so he did. Yes, Moses had to go find some stones to carve the rules on, because the first stones were given to Moses by God, cut with his own finger. I don't know where to look on this iPad because my face is here, right? And your face is there, even though I don't see it.
Okay, well, that kind of went off on a tangent, I think.
Hey, look, I'm a prophet, right? So I'm supposed to look like a crazy old man, so it's all right if I say stuff like that every now and then.
Well, Ralph Gutierrez says, okay, I was kind of afraid of asking that question because it might have be too critical of what you said. But that was a really good answer, he said.
No wrong answer. No wrong questions.
Yeah. Next comment comes from Mostly Censored. Says, sustenance and covering. Your take on this story and David Carrico are the two that make the most sense. Next question comes from Food and Water Music. They say, well, first of all, they say they like to talk to themselves as well, because you had said you talk to yourself.
Hey, I'll tell you what, if you're watching this and you're understanding what I'm saying and you're liking what you're hearing, there's got to be something about you that doesn't match the rest of the population. You've got to be messed up in the head. I walked around for years and years. I cried myself to sleep for 40 years before I got this page started, and then I kept on crying anyway. But the whole thing is, nobody wants anything to do with you if you speak truth, and so you have to just live isolated.
Yep, the world's upside down.
Yep.
But anyways, their question, Food and Water Music asks, maybe Zion is used like a metaphor, like a place scorched, like a spiritual desert. Then the ism could mean keepers of Zion in memory of Jerusalem. Maybe Zionists aren't evil necessarily.
Zionism is, I don't know, there's nothing in the Bible that would indicate that Zionism is good, except for the fact that the first time that land was called Zion was during King David's reign. I think, he was like 400 years in, right? So they had the period of the judges, and then Saul took over, who was very evil, and then God put David in place of Saul, and God said he liked David. David was a good person. So that's when the land was called Zion. But the fact it was burned up, that all had happened before David got in there. If David had been king from the very beginning, or if someone like David had been king from the very beginning, Zion, it would still be the land of milk and honey. In fact, there was a group of people in there that never participated in civilization. They were called the Rechabites, Rechabites, the ones who, when they got in there, they refused to engage in agriculture. They refused to make wine. They basically refused to do the stuff that people in civilization did. They They moved around as nomads. They didn't build structures. And so they were invited into the temple and told, have a seat. They had these rooms on the outside. You got the holy and the most holy, but then you had these rooms on the outside, like meeting rooms. And so they brought these Rechabites in there and said, have a seat. We really like you guys. Here, have a bowl of wine or a cup of wine. And they're like, no, no, no. Our Father, from the day we came into God's paradise, we have not engaged in agriculture. We have not made any wine. We have not drank any wine, and we will not do such a thing. And so because of that, God blessed them. And he had the Babylonians come in and exterminate everybody and haul them off into captivity, except the Rechabites. The Rechabites were allowed to live in there. And in fact, the Rechabites are probably the ancestors of the Palestinians, the indigenous peoples of the land, the people who didn't concern themselves with racial purity, the people who took care of God's paradise. Zionism is bad. There's nothing good about it.
Okay, a few more comments. Food and Water Music says, yeah, I dropped out of elementary school to start. I feel you. Ralph Gutierrez says, speaking truth doesn't match the rest of the population is an understatement. And Shannon says, I thought I was normal. I've always talked to myself. Okay. Next question comes from Bug Out Bubba. He says, think about what might happen in a globed Earth. I guess that's the flat Earth kind of thing. Temperature-controlled terrarium setup. If the inhabitants cut down and burned all the trees, talk about global warming. Might the ice globe melt?
Yeah, that's right. I've talked about that before. There was at one time, it says that all the floodgates of the heavens opened up in the Bible. I did some research on that because I'm like, wow, what in the hell is a floodgate of, the heavens? And so I read the scripture and it says, what it actually says in Hebrew is the sky window became shattered as if it was struck. That's what it says in Hebrew. The sky window became shattered as if it was struck, which is where we get the concept of the floodgates of the heavens opened up. Because if you notice, even the scientists say that there's like woolly mammoths smashed flat by ice. How does that happen? Oh, it was an ice age. Really? What's an ice age? Oh, that's the laws of physics. Every now and then the Earth just suddenly freezes instantly. Like, okay, that makes no sense. Whatever happened to the law of conservation of matter and energy? How did that... Is that like a miracle? No more law of conservation of matter and energy. We're going to instantly freeze the solar system. So it's nonsense. It's nonsense. There was obviously a feature surrounding the Earth. In the book of Revelation, it's called the Sea of Glass. But if you read it in Greek, what it says in Revelation is the frozen, the solid transparent ocean. Solid transparent ocean above the earth, where God's feet are said to rest in the opening parts of Revelation. So it's spoken of, and there's a few places in the Bible where the references are made to something solid and transparent above the earth prior to the flood. Did I answer the question, or was there a question? I don't even remember now.
It was kind of just talking about what you said, scorched and burning the trees, and would that melt the ice and all that stuff. Yeah. So
yeah. Oh, well, hey, you know what? Here's my thing. Is people are always like, oh, those Republicans, they say there is no such thing as global warming, and the Democrats say there's such a thing as global warming, and what a stupid fight. If you step on a roach, if you're in paradise and you intentionally step on a roach, you done doom the planet. Nothing on this planet was given to us to destroy. When it said have in submission all the other animals, what it says, if you read it in actual Hebrew, it says make sure nothing happens to the animals. And what did they do? They started hunting them and gathering them up and putting them in pens and murdering them to make food. They started cutting down trees to build temples to, goofy gods that can't do anything for them. So, yeah, there is global warming. Do I want to argue about whether it's caused by Freon or industrialism? No, I don't care about that. Global warming happens when you kill a living thing. Every single micron of anything on this planet is essential to this planet. When human beings say, We can be like God. God has all these rules in place for how we're supposed to live. We can improve on the rules. You know, he says don't kill the trees. Let's just say only kill certain kinds of trees and only if you really need them. Yeah, I'm going off.
No, it's all good. Next comment regarding the talking to yourself comes from Davy Shofar. It's okay to talk to yourself. You just shouldn't answer yourself.
Well, I lose both times, don't I? What do you call me? I didn't say anything.
Next comment comes from Get Your Shells. Says, can you elaborate about when mankind lost his ability to commune with God? The Bible refers to Adam, Abraham, Jacob, Moses, and others seeming to have direct communication with God. This is kind of outside of what prayer is to us today.
Yeah, I can't. Yeah, what is praying? Praying is making a wish without the candles. You know, that's basically what it is. I have a hard time praying, and I usually don't pray unless something I'm worried about another person. I'll get down on my knees and start crying and just praying for Ala Toledo to do good in the live stream tomorrow or something like that. But yeah, it's one of those things where when Adam is praying, you know, he's not on his knees. He's like, God, what should I do? Go over here. All right. Man, that's never happened to me. You know, so something special was going on with Adam. Another thing, what is it? What, you know, Eve could talk to serpents, apparently. And so it seems like at that time, in the very beginning, before mankind was cast out of the Garden of Eden, Adam could talk to God. Maybe Eve could talk to God too. I don't know. Eve could talk to animals. Apparently, Adam couldn't because, you know, in the past I've said, well, you know, Adam couldn't have been fooled because he wasn't there. Well, if you read the Bible, it says he was. It said Eve went and talked to the serpent. She brought Adam with her. She talked to the serpent. Adam did not have a clue what she was talking to the serpent about. She just grabbed a piece of fruit, ate it, grabbed another piece, gave it to Adam, and he ate. Like he didn't even know what was going on. But I mean, later on, we don't have stories of people talking to God or talking to animals anymore until you get to these certain individuals, like, you know, we're talking about now. Moses, he talked to God. Well, why couldn't everybody talk to God? But it seems to me that when the languages were confused at Babylon, it's not like the Chinese people couldn't speak to the French people. It was like humans couldn't talk to each other, humans couldn't talk to the animals, humans couldn't talk to God. So that's what the confusion of the languages sounds like. It doesn't seem like it's just different countries couldn't speak to one another. There's a lot more going on there. But every now and then somebody would be like a freak of nature and they'd come along, and like Balaam. Everybody knew that Balaam could talk to God. That was his thing. He could talk to God. And so they would send him. They sent him to Israel. They said, go tell Israel something stupid so they'll get messed up. He said, well, how much you pay me? So everybody recognized that he could talk to God. So he went over and said, oh, God says that this is going to happen. But when he would try to talk to the people, God would make him say the wrong thing. You know, make him say a true prophecy. He was supposed to give a false prophecy. But on the way there, an angel stood before him. Apparently Balaam couldn't see it, and he's got this flaming sword, and his donkey wouldn't go past. And so Balaam started beating his donkey, and he goes, what are you beating me for? He's like, there's an angel there with a sword. You want to get hurt? So there were instances of humans and animals speaking, and even later, you know, after Jesus died, his apostles or his disciples, 120 of them, were in a room. Fire came down on their heads, or something like fire came down on their heads, and suddenly they could communicate with everybody. They didn't learn any new languages. They just got out and spoke their own language, but everybody understood them. Did I answer the question that time? I'm so glad you're here.
No, I think you're doing great. I mean, I think they're just wanting to know if they can commune with God, and I think you kind of touched on that.
I don't think God's languages were confused,
Okay,
just man.
question.
So if we're talking to God, he hears us. And we may not think so, especially if you're praying for something and you don't get it. You know, for years and years and years, like everything I prayed for, I had to go years and years without a single prayer being answered. And until I started asking God to show me what certain verses in the Bible mean, nothing happened that I would consider miraculous. But, you know, now that I'm telling people who Melchizedek is, Like, it's not that big of a deal. Why doesn't everybody? The fact is, who cares? Nobody can tell you who Melchizedek is except me. And that's just one example. If we go through this Melchizedek, I'm going to tell you who Jesus is. I'm going to tell you who his apostles are. I'm going to tell you things about people that no one has heard in 2,000 years. And the list goes on and on and on and on. So for me to sit here and pout because God never answers my prayers, well, apparently he answers the ones I need answered, and he doesn't answer the others. Am I okay? Are you there?
Okay, bit of change of subject. Yep, I'm here. Sorry. So bit of change of subject. Bubba Joe says there's a hunt floating around that these large monolithic buildings around the world, like they had in the World's Fair in North America. And actually, he didn't say this, but there's been World Fairs around in different places around the world. But that these buildings were very much older than the history that we're led to believe. Have you ever heard of this or found any evidence of these weird buildings and World's Fairs and all that kind of stuff?
No, the only one I ever think about is like, I used to think, well, the Israelites, Jacob's children, were enslaved in Egypt, right? So while they were enslaved in Egypt, they built the pyramids, right? But if you look at that and you break it down into original Hebrew, they were making bricks. And it ain't just like the bricks that the pyramid was made out of, the cut stones. These were bricks that were made with straw and mud. And that's all that we see in the Bible. I thoroughly believe, I really believe that the pyramids, of everything else, at least the Great Pyramid of Giza, the one that's famous, that one was built before the flood, and then somehow it survived. I believe that. And there's a lot of evidence, not just from the Bible, but secular evidence that says that, like there's no writing in the pyramids. There's graffiti from later times, but, every time somebody builds a temple, what's the first thing they do? They get somebody to call on the side of it, this temple's dedicated to Zeus. Pyramids, there's nothing. There's no writing on any of the structures associated with a pyramid. Now, later pyramids came up and they had writing on them. And I think that goes back to the fact that, prior to the flood, there probably was not a written language. If every human being on earth could communicate with every other human being, and not just verbally, but like people did before the confusion of languages, where they were able to somehow talk to God, talk to one another, talk to the animals, what would be the point of making written books? Everybody would have access to all of the information in the world through everybody else. So, I think that structure was from the very beginning. And possibly other pyramidal structures, same thing. But I don't know anything about the World's Fair having these ancient structures up. I don't know anything about that.
Well, it's just this idea that the buildings from 100, 200 years ago were just extremely large, and they were assembled overnight. And it's like, how did they achieve all that in just a few weeks time to build everything, and then all of a sudden they just destroy it overnight and nothing's left of it?
Not my field of expertise. It's not, but that's a good question, because you think about it, that's the way some things are put up for these world fairs, and then when it's over with, they turn them into malls or government buildings or something like that. But yeah, you're right. A lot of times they'll say, let's have a World's Fair. 1 million people go there. There's bathroom facilities for everybody and lots of displays. And then they leave, and, a few months later, there's a field there.
Get Your Shell says the Washington Monument in Washington, D.C. is a sundial.
Yep. In the ancient past, they had these obelisks, and then they would have these other structures around it, so that depending on where the sun was, the shadow from the obelisk would land on these structures to tell you, like, what day of the year it was, what time it was, things like that. But around 700 years before Jesus came, the Babylonians went in and conquered Israel, and when they did, God put an end to the Sabbath by putting an end to whatever happened every 7 days. They would look up in the sky and go, oh, look, it's the Sabbath. But now nothing happens. You can go out there any day of the week and look. There's nothing that happens in the sky every 7 days. And when that happened, suddenly the obelisk put up by Nebuchadnezzar didn't work. Remember, he went into the temple to get the Ark of the Covenant. It wasn't there, but there was stacks of gold. And they were stacked up. It was Solomon demanded a payment of gold every year, including the Sabbath year. So every year, he would make people go out and get gold, even during the Sabbath year. And so they would have to give Solomon 666 talents of gold every year. It's like pallets of talents of gold, 666. They bring them into the temple. I'm sure of this. This is not in the Bible, but I'm sure that's where they were putting this stuff. They figured, well, there's no Ark of the Covenant. People are scared of going in there. Let's just go ahead and use it for storage of Solomon's gold. So they were sticking this in there, 666, 666, 666 talents of gold, just stacked up, stacked up, stacked up. Babylonians come in there and they go, hey, look, no Ark of the Covenant, but this is even better. So they loaded all this stuff up. It was Nebuzaradan, the general of Nebuchadnezzar. He put that stuff on ox carts and dragged it out to a place that was made of stone because nothing else could support the weight of that much gold. And they stacked it into an obelisk. And so all of the Israelites were forced to go out there, stand around that thing, and at a certain time of day, when the shadow was cast where it was supposed to be, they would know it was an equinox, or I guess it was an equinox, or a solstice. And they were supposed to play the trumpet and play the flute and sing, and everybody was supposed to bow down. Well, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego refused to bow down, so they threw them into a furnace. Well, that's the whole point of the story, is that at that point, whatever that shadow was supposed to point at, it didn't do it. So they said, well, let's do it tomorrow. So they went out there, still didn't do it. Somehow, their little sundial was not working, and they didn't know why. Well, when they figured out that their 360-day year had gone to 365, then everybody understood, oh, God changed things. But if you look at the Washington Monument, all ancient cultures associated with their obelisk are these all-seeing eyes. Right? It looks like an eyeball, like on the back of the dollar bill. If you go online, do it right now. Quit watching the video if you want. Go online and look up aerial view Washington Monument. And when a camera is stationed directly over it, looking straight down, the way that they were able to get the shadow of the Washington Monument to always fall on the all-seeing eye is that they put the Washington Monument on top of an all-seeing eye. So no matter where the shadow points, part of the shadow is touching that eye. Aerial view, Washington Monument. Go look. I'm not making this stuff up.
Going back to the idea about, the pyramids and building stuff, Food and Water Music says there's another YouTuber by the name of Brian Forrester who does a lot of research into these ancient megalithic structures, showing the difference between the craftsmanship and the necessity of having advanced technology back in those old days. I think he believes in aliens, actually. But
Yeah, I'll tell you what, I get, Carlos, my buddy Carlos that come down here and visit me, he I record all his Ancient Alien shows, but I never watch them because I just don't have time. So I'll talk to him and like, what's on Ancient Aliens Day? Oh man, they're talking about the same stuff that's in the Electric Universe. Because there's a YouTube channel that's always talking about, it's the Thunderbolts Project. Have you ever heard of them? They try to explain all these.
You set me up.
Yeah, but I guess I don't know why I just said that. I just blew it because people will be listening to me going, oh man, Sustenance and Cover knows everything. And I'll say, well, you look at the Thunderbolts Project. They will look at that and they go, oh, these guys got it right. I'm not listening to Sustenance and Covering anymore. So it's like me and Carlos have kind of come to a conclusion. It's best just to not even say anything to anybody. Because when you show it to them and it's they have really good graphics, good sound, stereo and everything. And people go look at that and they get mesmerized and then they're no longer interested in anything I say. But there's a lot of channels out there about aliens, a lot of channels out there about weird stuff happening in the sky, and it's good to go there and listen to why they believe in the things they believe. But don't believe in what they believe. Just look at their evidence. If they've got evidence, they show you an old stone tablet that has something written on it that's important, then try to think. Use your head. Read what's on the tablet or let them explain what it says on the tablet and make your own decisions. Because everybody out there's got some kind of agenda, it's always involved in stuff that's silly. It's not like I don't believe in aliens, but I don't know that I can explain what an alien is. I mean, there's people seeing weird stuff. I agree. The weird stuff seems to be intelligent. Okay, I agree with that. Aliens from another planet built Earth. Okay, look, all you know is there's stuff out there. Don't go speculating on what that means if you're going to be silly.
Okay, we're out of time. That's the hour. Can you go ahead and take us out?
Oh, really? Oh, well. Hey, you know what's cool? We got through it this time. No explanation. No rhyme or reason to why sometimes this stuff works and sometimes it don't. I'm sorry. We're going to do everything we can to keep this going, and I pray that everybody can continue to watch, especially getting through this series. I promise you, if you can go through all 10 videos in this Melchizedek series, you are going to know more about the Bible than has been known by any human being alive in the last 2,000 years. I promise you. And it's going to build your faith, and it's going to keep you informed so that as goofy stuff starts happening, you won't be getting involved in it. Because it's going to take faith. It's going to take strengthening of your faith to get you into the quickly approaching without getting yourself killed. There's people out there that want to be warriors for God, and if you let this system pull you in, you'll be a warrior for God. And guess what? The Bible says all of the warriors for God are about to be exterminated, so you don't want to do that. Oh, well, as always, hope y'all keep coming back, and if you don't want to survive, don't listen to us.